Hey folks, it's Swankivy and I'm here to bring you another episode of Letters to an Asexual. This is number 47, and I'm not feeling super good these days, and as a result of that, I am making a video without having put a lot of thought or preparation or energy into what I'm gonna say, so I hope you'll forgive me for making this a kind of sloppy video. But I'm not really gonna have another time when it's convenient to record this, and I still want to bring something out this month, so I'm just gonna take a less prepared crack at this. My topic today that I would like to discuss is asexuality and religion, and your perspective on your orientation if you're an asexual person may be affected by your religion. You may have different perspectives even within the same religion, just based on who you are and how your religion figures into your life if you have one, and then also how people in your life who may be like religious family members or religious significant others or just people in general looking at asexuality from a religious perspective. It will vary hugely among different religions and different people within those religions, and it will also be influenced somewhat by whether they consider asexuality to be like an alternative sexuality, so to speak, or whether they consider it to be basically the same as being straight by default, like some people do, even though that's not really accurate. So, again, because I am doing this kind of off the cuff, I hope that you'll forgive me for also fumbling around using my own book to help me, because I've written about this before. And so I'm just gonna look at the religion chapter while I do this so that I don't leave something out that I wanted to talk about. So I'm gonna talk about that, but first I would like to say that there are some religions that actually mention something that could be interpreted as a position on asexuality, and one of them, believe it or not, is mainstream Christianity that uses the New Testament as its Bible. So I think I want to start there. Let me see if I can find the religion section in my book here so that I can read a quote to you. Alright. Religious stuff. So when I first started talking about the intersection of like religious perspectives and asexuality for my book, I started with Christian perspectives just because that was so commonly discussed in my community about whether it was just going to be assumed that asexual people are people who stay virgins, and that isn't that a good thing in a lot of religious communities, that they want you to remain a virgin and that it makes you pure. And I mean, that kind of has its own problematic aspects, the idea of purity being associated with sex and morality, but the problem is there's the flip side of that, which is that there's commandments associated with getting married, and they suggest that when you are in a marriage that you're supposed to have sex, and that it's wrong to deny your partner sexual union in the hopes of having children. And that has so many problems with it, partly because some people want to be married and not have sex, and also because it suggests that marriage is something that should necessarily be formed for the purpose of producing children, and some people can't have children, or they shouldn't because of health reasons or other reasons. So reserving marriage for the production of children has all kinds of problems with it, but in the New Testament there's a quote from Corinthians 7:8-9 in the New International Version. I'm looking that up, where I guess it was Paul said, with the quote, "Now to the unmarried and the widows I say, it is good for them to stay unmarried as I do, but if they cannot control themselves, they should marry, for it is better to marry than to burn with passion." And he also continues by saying, "I say this as a concession, not as a command. I wish that all of you were as I am, but each of you has your own gift from God. One has this gift, another has that." And he's suggesting there that if you want to have sex and you can't control yourself, it's better to marry the person that you want to have sex with, so that that won't be a sinful union. And if you have beliefs associated with how marriage should figure in to your religion, you may be able to use that in, if you are a Christian person and you're asexual and your community or your parents or somebody in your circle is giving you issues about how this is against God, you can quote Paul and say, look, he says this straight out, that asexual people exist, or at least people that don't desire sex. It's oversimplified and problematic in its own way, but this is a straight up acknowledgement that some people who don't have that desire exist in the world. But unfortunately, it seems like it's, staying unmarried and not having sex, those are two things that are lumped together. And that marriage is always for being in a union with someone and having sex with them. So, it'll have limited usefulness, I guess, if you're using biblical support to defend your orientation for somebody who may find that to be important. But it is there. I mean, that's a straight up quote, and it's in a couple different places. So I also want to say that chastity is prized in a lot of dialogues that are in religious communities, but at the same time, they seem to have it centered around waiting for the right person. The assumption is generally that you're either going to find someone and eventually give yourself to them in a sexual union, presumably for the purpose of having children, or you're going to remain celibate, and you're going to be doing that in a religious context, and that you're going to be doing it to devote yourself to God, or, they say become a nun. The suggestion that I should become a nun for some reason because of not having sex I've heard that so many times, it's ridiculous. And I'm like, well, wouldn't the fact that I'm not Catholic have something to do with why I shouldn't do that? But no, they associate it so strongly with celibacy that they think that's like the primary focus. I know it's a joke and all, but anyway. So, I actually know someone that wanted to become a nun when they were younger, and they said that they were thinking about taking the first steps to become a nun, and they were told by somebody who was a nun that they should not do it the abstention from sex is supposed to be a sacrifice. So if it's not a sacrifice for you, if it's just a natural part of what you would be doing anyway, then they say, this particular nun said to them, to my friend, that that makes you ill-suited for being a nun. So, I mean, there's an example of someone in the church rejecting someone for their asexuality, or at least for their lack of sex drive. It gets very mixed up because we're not real clear on what exact part of it they're rejecting or that they have problems with. So I have also had contact with people who, you know, as they move into the age where they're supposed to be settling down with a marriage partner, their families will get aggressive about trying to do matchmaking with them for someone that they think is a good match. And they'll start to create a hostile atmosphere in the home or in the family unit to encourage that person to accept these aggressive situations where they're trying to make them date or make them get married when they may not want to. And someone I had direct contact with was saying that they were gonna, their family was threatening to kick them out of the house if they didn't obey what the parent wanted. In this specific thing, they were treated like they were a spoiled child who was refusing to honor their parents' wishes. And this was offered in a religious context as well. So in that case, you hear people say asexual people don't have enough in common with LGBT folks to be joining these communities because they don't face the possibility of violence or rejection from inside of their family. But I've heard stories like that a bunch of times. I also heard from somebody who said that they tried to come out to their parents and their dad was so angry about it that they had to pretend it was a joke until a couple of months down the road their dad finally calmed down and stopped harassing them about it. And you know, they were threatening to kick them out of the house because they said this, and they had to pretend it was a joke. Long story short, there are plenty of accounts I've heard from people in my community who have had a religious perspective informing aggression, hostility, rejection within mostly traditional families, you know, where they think the person is, they're rejecting their culture or they're not adhering to commandments. And, you know, now I'm gonna go on to a related religion on that note. I come from a Jewish background, and the Jewish side of my family, which, you know, is my dad's side, my mom converted before I was born, so because it was, as it's told to me, it was important to my dad's side to have Jewish children. So I was raised Jewish, and I didn't really hear perspectives like this, I guess because they weren't incredibly religious, but you know, my grandfather was a cantor. It's like a religious singer, if you don't know what that is, in the temple. So, I mean, he was basically clergy. And so there was some of this perspective in my background, but I never heard anything about perspectives on, like, marriage or anything like that, but it's a very, there's a very specific commandment for Jewish people that they're supposed to get married and replace themselves and their spouse. They're supposed to try to have a boy and a girl, and then they've fulfilled this. It's raining here, sorry. Florida has, it's summer right now as I'm making this, June, and Florida has afternoon thunderstorms almost every day. Nice little trivia for you about Florida weather. It's really weird. Anyway, let me see. In my book I wrote, in traditional Judaism, propagation of the people is of primary importance, and some doctrines even say celibacy breaks religious law, since it constitutes failure to fulfill the divine command to have children, which I footnoted, and the quote is, "Every man is obligated to marry a woman in order to reproduce. Anyone who is not having children is as if they were killers." So, and of course also the be fruitful and multiply, that's from the Old Testament. So that's a perspective that comes out of the Jewish religion, is you're supposed to do everything that you can to put more of your group onto the planet. And regardless of whether you have children, asexuality is linked in a lot of people's minds to childlessness. And it's almost like it's across many, many cultures. There's this almost humorously framed idea of parents flipping out over their children, not giving them grandchildren, how dare you. But I mean, it's a real thing that even though they kind of make a joke out of it, you can really get harassed by your parents and taught that you're selfish if you don't have kids. So, I mean, that has its roots in a lot of different religions. And by the way, while I was researching for this book, I talked to a bunch of people in the community when I was trying to figure out what perspectives I may not have considered that I should consider. And one of the most contributed to sections was this section on religion, where people from different backgrounds that I was not a part of had given me thoughts on it. And one of those was some of my Muslim readers had given me some perspectives. And one of the quotes that was offered to me was regarding how Islam says, my book says, though marriage is emphasized as expected, there is still room for celibacy, but similarly it's recommended only for those who don't marry. And the quote there is, "If one's healthful condition, integrity of heart, and peace of soul reside in celibacy, then that is better for him, since these are things that are desired of marriage. If one can reach these without marriage, then celibacy causes no harm." And I can quote these and their sources in the info of this video if you'd like. So then there was some talk about what is essentially like atheistic religions. Many forms of like Buddhism are more like philosophy, I guess. They're practiced that way, at least. They're not focused on a deity. And you can kind of go back and forth on that. There's lots of different kinds of Buddhism. So some of the ones that have been popularized in the West are not necessarily, they might not even be recognizable to people who actually practice them in the East. But I have a reference in the book about how this is something that I actually heard from someone who claimed to be Buddhist, who said that very similar to my friend who said that they were not permitted to become a nun because of this. Cleansing oneself of sexual desire is, part of what you do to try to make yourself have fewer desires and wants, and therefore more peace. And if that part comes to you naturally, then it's not something that you learned. It's not a lesson that you undertook and purged from yourself. So it may be perceived as being too easy and therefore not valid. So anyway, what's really bizarre to me is that there are some people who are accepting of same-sex marriage and queer relationships, and sometimes even trans folks. They're accepting of that, but they're not accepting of asexuality. And that's weird to me when they're like that, but usually what will happen is if you try to invoke, like, you wouldn't say that to a gay person, you wouldn't deny a gay person. Usually, yeah, they would. Usually those things go hand in hand, not all the time, but most of the time. If you dig around for the person's perspectives, you'll find that they actually are transphobic, they actually are homophobic, or they may be accepting and claim that because they don't hate those groups, then therefore they're accepting, but actually they still believe that we all have a disorder because everything that does not contribute to reproduction is by definition a biological disorder. And I've heard that so many times too, and more often than not it comes from pseudo-scientific people who think that they're spouting biological perspectives, when, a lot of the people who actually study sexuality that I've had contact with, they have no such perspective. But you would kind of think that these things would come more often out of religious perspectives, but they don't. They're much more often offered by wannabe scientists who don't really understand science either, but think that they're objective or think that they're very rational. And a lot of times they're really not. Let's see, what else do I have here? I'm gonna give you a quote from one of the other asexual activists whose writings I like. Here's a quote about chastity in association with asexuality and morality. Quote, "If asexuals are chaste, it's not usually because they hold it up as a virtue. It's because they would rather be chaste, regardless of whether or not they happen to think it as a virtue. I certainly do not regard chastity as a virtue. Furthermore, like many other asexuals, I am not chaste. I find it really offensive to stuff these values into my mouth and pretend that's what I asked for." And that leads me to another perspective, is that so many people will assume that you're religious, that you're subscribing to some kind of chastity vow. If you say that you're asexual, they'll associate that with not being sexually active, and also thinking that you're pure, and also thinking that you're better than other people. I hope you can still see me in the camera, because now I'm laying down. I'm feeling like crap, sorry. So let's see, what else do I have? Oh yeah, I should probably talk about mine. So it's hard for me to really nail down a specific religion that I would say I belong to. But I identify as like an atheistic pagan. And so paganism is definitely something that I relate to, and I don't know if I would say it's a practice for me anymore. I have explored some practices of sort of an eclectic take on paganism, but I think it's just more of a philosophy for me, that I like the idea of being connected to the past and being connected to the earth. And so some of the holiday celebrations that I do will just be mostly about redecorating my house to reflect the seasons and acknowledging the cycle and the spiral of the year. I like to bake things that are seasonal. But I don't worship anything. I think of like gods and goddesses and whatnot as sort of a celebration of humanity's tendency to personalize and humanize things. Anyway, in a lot of pagan circles, you will find open and accepting groups and practices for a lot of diverse sexualities. You don't find a whole lot of homophobic by nature, like Wiccan groups or pagan groups. Occasionally you will find some homophobia and transphobia in maybe something that would be certain stripes of Dianic witchcraft and whatnot, because like they might be focused on goddess worship and assume that you have to have been born with a vagina to be really a woman, and there's a lot of focus in certain very traditional types of witchcraft and certain kinds of paganism on male-female polarity, like that there's a goddess and a god, and therefore all of nature is masculine or feminine. And while I can appreciate some of that as symbolism, I think it can be dangerous to divide everything like that, especially with people, and associating reproduction with sexual reproduction. Not all reproduction is sexual in nature, so not supporting same-sex or not supporting non-binary people and any relationships that they might have. I don't think there's much of an excuse for that, using a nature religion to justify it. But in any case, a lot of times you'll be able to find nature religions that are accepting of asexuality, but because there is this focus on sexual celebrations, like there's sometimes symbolic or even literal sex in certain rituals, depending on the type of group that you go to. There's a lot of, a lot of symbolism that is very sexual, and sometimes they will look at you, if you're asexual or you're chaste, they will look at you as if you're a prude, and that you're not in touch with whatever natural inclinations that they think you should have. So sometimes you can find outright hostility in certain kinds of pagan groups, and again, I'm not saying all, just like I'm not saying all with Christian groups and other more traditional religious groups. You're not going to find it everywhere. You're always going to be able to find examples of more accepting and more tolerant religious groups. But I have heard of some people having a hard time in a group when they've joined and they found everything was pretty cool until they disclosed that they were asexual, and then people treated them like, oh, you must not be in touch with your real sexual self, your spiritual self, your earthly self. You need to get past that, and you need to have sex because it's natural. So, I mean, you do sometimes see that, and even if you don't see direct pressure to have sex yourself, sometimes these communities can be very sexualized, and, they'll treat you like your failure to participate or you being squicked by it in any way is, judgment of them, or it can just be hard for an asexual person to be in a very sexualized space of any kind. And come to think of it, that has been a complaint among, not just asexual people, but people in general who want to participate in queer activism. Sometimes spaces have become very sexualized in response to not being allowed to have that, not being allowed to be proud of it, or not being allowed to express it in other places where it's either not safe or you're just treated like you're gross. So these spaces sometimes become very sexualized, and then they may not be friendly for certain people who may be sexual assault survivors, people who may be from backgrounds that they find that very distasteful, people who are asexual, people who, may have a problem with it for some other reason. It's just, there are all kinds of ways that you can end up encountering that in queer spaces that can be kind of similar to what I'm talking about with pagan spaces being very sexualized. And they're doing that for a different reason. They're doing it to celebrate, but sometimes it can make it unfriendly to people like us. If you happen to be one of the people that is not comfortable with that. And I'm kind of one of those people that I'm comfortable with it in theory, but I don't actually personally want to be involved, or probably don't want to see too much of it. So, I'd be more of the perspective that I should remove myself from those types of groups if I don't like what they're doing. But sometimes if that's the only thing available and it's serving other needs that you have, sometimes it can be hard to have that kind of stuff going on in your space, and you are uncomfortable with it or something. So let's see. Well, I'm sure that there are perspectives in both religions that I haven't covered, and perspectives in religions that I have covered that I haven't covered that particular perspective. But I think I've run out of juice here, and I've probably been talking for a while. So I think I'm going to end the video here. And you can feel free to talk in my comments if you have stuff that you want to talk about maybe your own experiences with religion and asexuality. And I hope that you've been okay with watching me kind of fumble my way through this video, because I know that it's not very good quality, and that I'm really just not in too good a shape to be doing it right now. So, I hope you've been able to bear with me here, and hopefully next time I make a video I'll be feeling better. So, I'll see y'all next time. Bye.